If you've been intrigued by what you've been seeing on this channel and are considering moving to Saipan, if you'd like a sunnier, simpler, slower lifestyle while still being part of the US, then start with the Saipan Living Relocation Guide, an A to Z reference of everything you'll need to adjust to life here on Saipan, Tinian, or Rota. Order here on YouTube, on Amazon, or at saipanliving.com. Then consider a phone or Zoom consultation where you can ask any question at all to plan your move to Saipan. Then when you're ready to take the leap, you can sign up for a reconnaissance tour before you move, or a relocation tour. Visit different neighborhoods, see what life is like, get your paperwork in order, your PO box, your ID, so you can hit the ground running. As a bonus, if you sign up for any tour or consultation, you'll get a copy of the Fast Track Kit that has all the forms and documents and applications you need to start your residency. My name is Walt Goodridge. Let's make your move to Saipan simple, fast, and stress-free. Okay, welcome to the Discover Saipan channel, and my name is Walt Goodridge, and let's get started. So, usual administrative stuff. This live stream will work much better if you participate and if you ask questions. That's what I'm here to do. And as the group grows, I might miss some of the questions that you ask in the chat box. So if I don't get to it, just make sure you ask your question again. And as I always say, you can feel free to ask any question at all that you'd like. And I cannot be embarrassed or offended, so feel free to ask anything at all that is on your mind. And let's see. If you're watching this after the actual live stream, feel free to leave your questions in the comment section or on the comment section of any video on the channel, and I'll compile them and ask them and answer them in the next live stream. And I do have a relocation guide, and the Saipan Living Relocation Guide, and also a relocation fast track that has forms that you might be interested in if you're planning to relocate to Saipan. If you'd prefer not to use your debit card and credit card online, you can email me at walt@discoversaipan.com, and I'll send you information on how to make payment via Zelle or PayPal, or I'll send you a direct link so you can use your PayPal account, so you won't have to use your credit or debit card information online. Later on in the stream, I'm going to have information on tickets, airline tickets, that might be of interest to you. There have been some new developments over the past few days, some announcements that might be of interest, so we can help those individuals who are thinking of relocating. All right, so I'm just checking to make sure that everything looks good, and if you're checking into the live stream, please let me know that you're with us. You can send any question at all and we'll get started. Okay, so just to follow up from last week about Discover Card being used or not being able to be used here on Saipan. And I do have some information from personal experience that might be of interest. First, if you are a Capital One banking customer, you may have been informed over the last few weeks that a new card is being issued to you. When I got my card, I looked at the number and I realized that it started with a 6. The debit card number started with a 6. Now, this is something you may not be familiar with unless you're in retail or unless you have an online business that actually accepts credit cards. But if a debit card or credit card begins with a 3, then it's an American Express. If it begins with 4, it's Visa. If it's 5, it's MasterCard. And if it's 6, it's Discover Card. So my Capital One MasterCard was replaced with a new debit card that started with the number 6. So I immediately knew something was different, something was amiss. So I did some research and found out that in March or April of this year, Capital One purchased Discover Card, and they've decided to use the Discover card processing system to save money because it's an independent system separate from Visa and MasterCard. And so those of us who had previously had a MasterCard issued by Capital One now have a Discover card issued by Capital One. And I have used the card here on Saipan at various stores, and it does work fine, does work well. I did have one little issue when I attempted to access my balance on at an ATM, and I wasn't able to, and I got an error message that said it was restricted in some way. But otherwise, I was able to use it for purchases, so I'll look into that and find out why it might have been restricted. But I would naturally expect that there will be some glitches as the system is rolled out and implemented. All right, so um, let's see. Yes, Mark asked, why, Walt, any signs of a rebound in tourists coming to the CNMI? Some information that I have about flights to the island might bode well for that reality at some point in the future. So I'll share those with you in a few minutes. All right, so I'll just share a couple other so as far as the Discover card goes, yes, it is usable here on Saipan, so you shouldn't have an issue with that. But again, if you've gotten a new one, then I have read that throughout the entire system, throughout the world, and possibly if you're traveling and now using the card in a foreign country, there might be some glitches that need to be worked out as things get more acclimated. All right, so let's do some not mean tweets. Let's do some friendly tweets. There's 13 Islander says, thanks for promoting my island. There are a couple of bloggers on Saipan, including you, who need to be recognized by the mayor of Saipan. I miss my home. As Saipan, you deserve recognition from the local government. Thanks for that, 13 Islander. Really appreciate that. Actually, I have been. I mean, I'll always accept more recognition, but I have been recognized by the CNMI Senate within a year or two of arriving on the island and starting some of the projects I've started. So there was a Senate resolution that recognized my contributions to CNMI society. That's on my wall there. I was recognized by the governor's office. The governor of Saipan, I got the CNMI. I got a Governor's Humanities Award, three of them, a couple of years ago. So yes, I am fortunate enough to have been recognized by the CNMI government for some of my contributions here, but I wouldn't shy away from any more because that would mean more publicity and more people finding out about the channel, more people finding out about the island, and possibly helping with the boost the economy. Okay, so thanks for that. Let's see. Now, Waanasauku says, can you drink the tap water? The answer is no. Do not drink the tap water. It is brackish, which is a word we use here, just simply means salty. The water table here on Saipan is high, so the well water here is brackish, is salty. So no one here drinks the water, or very few people do. Most people have either a subscription to a company that delivers 5-gallon water bottles, reverse osmosis filtered water, and that's what we drink here on the island. Or if you have your own installed in your apartment or home, you can install a filter, and or if you have your own 5-gallon water bottles, you can go to some of the vendors here and refill them yourselves here on the island. So no, don't drink the tap water. Number two, is electricity constant? Yes, it is. When I first came to the island, we blackout due to planned construction or rehabilitation, then the public is notified typically in the newspaper. And is the internet constant? Yes, to that as well. Internet is very constant. Keep in mind, we have people here from all over the Asia Pacific region who keep in touch with their friends and family through Zoom, through the internet, through their phones. So the internet access is something that is heavily invested in here, so it's very constant. But there are certain areas on island that are not served as well as they could be. For example, if you go to the far north of the island, up in Marpi, let's say near Banzai Cliff, then you might not have cell phone service depending on where you which company you're using, whether you're using Docomo Pacific or whether you're using IT&E. But generally, the cell phone service as well as internet access is uh, very constant. I don't think you'll have anything to worry about there. Okay, hello from Reading, Pennsylvania, Jammer. Okay, now, getting to Mark's question, any signs of a rebound in tourists coming to the CNMI? And for those of you who are new, the CNMI stands for the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, of which Saipan is one of 3 inhabited islands. So, now for the big announcement. It has come to my attention, and it's in all the newspapers and all of the travel websites, that Philippine Airlines, is going to be resuming their direct flights from between Saipan and Manila. So that's something to look forward to. And it could mean more tourists coming to the island, easier access for people who live here. We have a sizable population of Filipinos here on the island. So being able to travel back and forth if their visa status allows, that could bode well for travel between Manila and Saipan. And one of the things that um, is beneficial about that is Manila is a major hub. So if you are on stateside and you're coming to this side of the world, one of the options is to fly to Manila. And you can definitely get direct flights from the mainland to Manila, and then from there, from Manila to Saipan, starting March 26th. So if you are making plans to relocate, you can actually start now. I think you're able to go on the website, Philippine Airlines website, and actually price your tickets and purchase your tickets now for flights in March, and you'll be able to save some money now because I'm fairly certain there are reduced flights, reduced prices as a launch promotion. All right, so that's one major announcement. So beginning March 26th, there will be direct flights from Manila to Saipan. Second, Jeju Airlines from Korea is going to be um, launching flights from Busan, South Korea, to Saipan starting next month, or starting this month, December through February 25th. So, similarly, if you're coming to this side of the world anyway, then you might want to fly through South Korea and then directly to Saipan. That might be able to save you some money as well. Similarly, if you're flying through Manila, then you'll have less flights, less legs of your flight to endure in order to get here. And then finally, Hong Kong Airlines is going to be increasing from 2 flights per week to Saipan, direct from Hong Kong to Saipan. And again, so now we have 2 flights per week. It's going to be going up to 4. So again, those are 3 new options that will exist starting early in the spring of next year that could help those who are considering relocating to save some money and make the trip a little bit more doable. All right, so let me know how you guys, when you do some research, if you can share your information, that would be helpful. So one of the things that I might also suggest, again, since the Philippines is a major hub, if you are considering relocating to this side of the world, many of the guys who watch this channel are considering Thailand, they're considering Vietnam, they're considering Cambodia, Laos. My suggestion, if you can afford it, is to plan a trip where you can scout out those destinations, Philippines, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, for a week or 2, and then head to Saipan. So you break up the trip a little bit and then do some reconnaissance before coming to Saipan. And then, as I've mentioned before, you can actually use this island as your home base to do traveling to other parts of the Asia Pacific region. So that's some good news that might be of help to you guys. Okay. Okay, now this is an interesting question. Rhythms and Retrogrades asks, is there any public land that you can harvest fruit from or hunt on? Interesting. The answer to your question is yes. Is in theory the answer is yes. There's lots of land on Saipan that, whether public or private, is in a de facto sense considered public land. There are people who own property who may not be monitoring it. There are stretches of land, plots of land that might be overgrown, and it's generally accepted throughout the community that there's that you can pick a fruit, grab some malunggay from a tree, and no one will say anything. However, technically, private land is private land, and you'd be trespassing if you were on that. But that's a very good question as to the legality of hunting and harvesting on public land. I know there were some initiatives in previous years where people were looking to set up public farms tended by the local community by volunteers, where people could grow and have access to sort taro or to fruits and other vegetables as a community effort. So that's something that I haven't heard much about that recently, but that's something that could exist, something you could suggest to the mayor's office, something that could be uh, reinvigorated to allow for public harvesting. But there's logistics to that that may make that a little bit impractical. But interesting question. I'll look more into that. Mark asks, for people planning a relocation to the CNMI, it might be interesting to hear about 3 things that are unexpectedly expensive and 3 things that are unexpectedly inexpensive. Okay, so unexpectedly expensive might be gas, because the shipping of the gasoline for your cars now has to go an extra leg, whether it's coming from the mainland. Then gas prices on Saipan and Tinian and Rota tend to be a little higher than people are used to. Right now, I think it's $5.90 or so per gallon. And on Tinian, it could be as high as $7 a gallon, and on Rota, it could be as high as $8 or $9 a gallon. So that's something that's unexpectedly expensive. Something that's unexpectedly inexpensive is our rental prices. As I've mentioned in previous videos, you can get an apartment for less than 500 a month. You can, in certain places, even get entire homes for less than that if they're on hard to reach parts of the island. Can't think of anything else for now, but good question. I'll come up with some more. People have mentioned that they find shopping here more expensive. I find it cheaper. But again, because shipping could add some additional expense to some of the goods that you're used to getting, if you are attempting to replicate a mainland diet here and buying products that are from sourced from the mainland, then you might pay a little bit more. Again, maybe meat might be more expensive from the mainland. I have no idea. I haven't looked in that aisle because I'm vegetarian, but I have spoken to people who have said that shopping here is a little more expensive. So that could be something. I have done a few videos on the prices here, and people have commented that they seem reasonable. But again, these are things that I personally buy, and I tend to do my shopping at the farmers market So I buy locally and eat locally. So for me, it's not that expensive. But good question. All right. Um, let's see. Earlier, or in one of my videos, did a video, I think, on why Saipan people are so friendly. And someone made an interesting comment. Jason James 4254 mentioned that he agrees that the goal is to blend and assimilate. Don't contrast and compare. Much of that formal politeness is reserved for strangers, but tends to melt away as you form personal relationships with locals. Whatever you do or wherever you go, do not bring your New York City or Texan or Californian surfer dude attitude with you overseas. Trust me, it doesn't translate. Good advice, Jason James. Yes, sounds like someone. I'm not sure if he's actually here on Saipan or if he's just speaking from experience, perhaps living in Thailand or the Philippines. I've run into people who are lack the situational awareness to realize that their worldview or their personalities are not fitting in well with the local culture. And I'm speaking whether it's in Thailand, whether it's in the Philippines, whether it's here on Saipan. There are people who are not self-aware enough to read the room correctly and to not notice, for example, that people tend to speak with an inside voice, that people tend not to draw attention to themselves, people tend not to be confrontational on this side of the world, and they'll come with an expectation that their personalities, their ways of being, ways of seeing the world, ways of interacting are transferable to this culture. And I suggest that even though people have generally a live and let live attitude, there are certain ways of being that will get you stigmatized, not in a necessarily negative way, but it'll reinforce the stereotype of the loud Westerner, the loud American. It'll reinforce the stereotype of the Karen, the self-entitled Karen. And it doesn't fit well here in the sense that I think it will always create a somewhat of a wall between you and the local community. Whereas, and again, I'm speaking whether it's in Philippines or Thailand or Vietnam. I think it's important to blend and assimilate and realize that you are the foreigner, even though people will go out of their way to be gracious towards you, and they will overlook certain cultural faux pas because you are, in fact, a foreigner. I think it's wise to uh, put yourself in observer mode before you launch into your regular way of being. And again, if you're self unaware, then what I'm saying, you may not even be able to appreciate that there is a different way of seeing the world that exists here on the island. There are people who will make certain references. I've seen this myself. There are people who will speak to Americans who will speak to people from the Philippines or China or Korea, and they'll use cultural references that I know have no meaning to someone who grew up in this culture. But the person making that reference, whether they're referencing a TV show or a saying that proverb that is known in the West but not in the East, they're not aware that the person they're speaking to is just it's just going over their head. It's not getting through. And I, as an observer, I can see that the person may be nodding and smiling, but they're not really grasping the information. So anyway, that's just an example that to say that yes, Jason, I agree with you that uh, a valuable trait to have as someone coming to live in a new culture is to be able to observe as an outsider and blend and assimilate. All right, so thanks for that. Um, So I've read about rolling blackouts on some small islands. How reliable is the power grid there? Stop doing that. asked that question, and I did answer that question earlier. So hope you got that one. Okay, now someone asked an interesting question, and it'll give me a chance to talk a little bit. Oh, okay. Here's a question. Mark asked again, do you see many open water swimmers along the beaches, and can one assume sharks are not an issue inside the reef? Typically, no. We haven't heard of any shark attacks. In fact, I have a video on this channel of a dive instructor actually petting a sleeping shark here. I wouldn't suggest you necessarily do that. She knew what sort of sharks pose less danger, I suppose. But yes, there are people who will go swimming here on the island. There are even people who will go surfing if the waves are high enough. If there's a high surf advisory, but I wouldn't suggest you do that. So yeah, people do swim here, open open water swimmers. So if that's the crowd that you belong to, you might be able to find some kindred spirits. All right. And someone asked a question. I think I have it here, but it essentially asked for why I chose Saipan. Was it had I visited the island before, as to why I'm promoting the island? All right, so let me answer that. Let me see if I can get the actual question here so I can quote directly. All right. Community, let's ask the question here. Uh, Mayor Bear One asked, I viewed a couple of your videos and you do a pretty good job of promoting the island. My question is, what made you choose Saipan? Did you visit that island in the past before moving there? No, I did not visit the island in the past before moving here, but I will tell you the story. So I'm originally from Jamaica, as you might know, and I lived in New York most of my life. Went to college there, went to high school, went to college there. Started working in corporate America for all those years. But I always wanted to be free. Didn't like the concept of working for a living, so I was always looking for a way to jump out on my own and do my own thing. I remember working in the at the World Trade Center and looking out the window and seeing the people who were free during the middle of the day while I was trapped in an office in cubicle working. So that desire for freedom is my prime directive. I always make my decisions based on what gives me the most freedom. And so even from in college, I ventured into the music industry to start my own record label, release my own records as a way I hoped to free me from having to work in corporate America. And uh, giving you the shorter version of the story, I started a record label, had a fair amount of success, but wasn't enough to really free me. But years later, I ran into a business partner of mine, a fellow who was one of the artists on my record label, and he was still in the music industry, and he had visited Japan to work with some producers there. And as part of the adventure, they brought him to Saipan. Saipan has always been or had always been a frequent vacation spot a favorite vacation spot for people in Japan. So they brought him here, spent a few weeks here, interacted with local musicians and producers, and he had a great time, took photos. And I ran into him a year later, and in December at a party in Brooklyn. And I'll give you a little bit of some of the trivia of that if you're interested. And if you're not interested, you still have to listen anyway. The party had ended. It was maybe 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and on a Saturday night in Brooklyn, and it was snowy and cold. And when we were ready to leave for my friend to drive me back from Brooklyn to the Bronx, where I lived at the time. I think I may have been in Upper Manhattan in Harlem at the time, but we realized that his vehicle was being blocked by someone, by the next door neighbor. So the next door neighbor had parked in such a way that we couldn't exit the vehicle, we couldn't take the vehicle out to drive me back home. My friend suggested that we wake the neighbor up and ask if they could, if he or she could move the car. And I said, no, that's okay. It's already 3 in the morning. They'll probably get up in a few hours anyway to go to church, and we'll just wait and talk. So we ended up sitting and talking for a while about different topics, reminiscing about the past, talking about his time in Japan, and then he got around to talking about Saipan, and I can't remember the exact words he used or at what point in his rant that something clicked, but it did. It's something clicked, and I realized that Saipan was where I needed to be. He talked about the beautiful weather. He talked about the friendly people. He talked about the pretty girls. He talked about how it was um, part of the U.S. I'm not sure if he had mentioned it at that time, but and that he had a wonderful time. And something clicked in my mind, and I decided that's where I needed to be. And that was December. Um, that he introduced me to it, and I followed up with him. And 2 months later, by February of the next year, I was on a one-way flight to Saipan. So again, something just clicked. I'd never visited the island before, but the way my friend Ken sold it to me, it just sounded like the place that I wanted to be. I'd always liked the Asia Pacific region. On my bucket list of places to travel had always been Singapore and China and Thailand. So being in this part of the world really seemed appealing to me, and I could be part in the U.S. for immigration purposes at the same time. So I jumped out on my own. He was nice enough to introduce me to a fellow who lived here, attorney Joe Hill, and I interacted with Mr. Hill, and he said I could stay with him while I got acclimated to the island, and that was my introduction to Saipan. And again, I always tell people it's the best decision I ever made in my life, and or one of the top three decisions I ever made in my life, and I have no regrets at this point. But nope, never came to do any reconnaissance. I just went off my friend Ken's word and the friendliness of the people who he introduced me to, and that's the long answer to that question. And I threw in some of the details because had I not opted to wait for the neighbor to wake up and move his or her car, we may not have had that conversation about Saipan, and I may not be here today if that had not happened. So I always think about that. Um, that little turn of events that ended up that landed me here on the island. But so that's the long answer to your question. Let's see. Rhythms and Retrogrades asks, how does the island's plumbing infrastructure compare to the mainland? Are water treatment and sanitation systems similar? Okay, one of the unfortunate things about the island is that the infrastructure never really caught up to the population demand. When the island was first opened up to the public in the early 70s, prior to that, you could not come to the island unless you had some specific military or government business, maybe some diplomatic business to come here. But the island was closed to outsiders from right after the war through the naval administration in the 60s, and then I believe either very late in the 60s, 69 to early 70s, it was finally opened up to the public. And then the tourism industry got started, and then the garment industry got started. So the influx of people to the island, the infrastructure was never really able to keep up. So we have certain places that flood when there's a typhoon or heavy storm. Um, But as far as individual buildings with plumbing, I think that's pretty good for the most part. There are some areas of the island that have lower water pressure. I used to live in Garapan, and I remember the water pressure in Garapan was um, famously less than other areas. I'm not sure if that has since been fixed because that was several years ago, but the infrastructure could be better in certain regards, but for the most part, I don't think you'll run into any major issues there. Sanitation, again, we have various companies that do pickup, so most homeowners and landlords will have a contract with a sanitation company and that'll come and pick up a few times a week and then cart it up to the dump on the north end of the island. So the sanitation pickup, that is pretty good, but it does not exist on Tinian, and probably not on Rota either. So you would have to do your own, bring your items to the dumps on Tinian and Rota. But I don't think you'll run into any major issue, especially if you're living in an apartment. If you do decide to live in a home, make sure you check that out first. But most apartment landlords have done a good job of keeping the plumbing functional and operational. All right. Uh, okay, interesting questions. Thanks for that, Mark. Great story. Okay, all right. Now I'm wondering, there's a question that Pete Yates has asked, and I'm wondering if I should answer the question. The question is, do you have a female companion? Okay, so here's how I'll answer that question. I'm assuming that you mean for my YouTube channel. Do I have a companion, a partner for my YouTube channel? No, I do not. I do everything myself, so no. Um, if you're asking, now, the reason I may not tell you the answer to that question, I am heterosexual, just so you know, but is because I have to think about that, whether I want that information broadcast on YouTube. But thanks for asking, because I'm going to have to determine some of the limits of the information that I share about myself. So one of the things that's off limits is my age. I never discuss my age. I don't discuss, for the most part, income levels. That's just something we don't do in Jamaica. People ask, how much do you make? It's none of your business. And so whether I have a female companion, interesting. But I'll share this with you. If you go to Jamaican in Asia, my YouTube channel, Jamaican in uh, Asia, you'll see some of my interactions uh, when I was in China and Singapore and Laos. And then you can draw your own conclusion. All right. Okay, so thanks for the question. I really appreciate it. I'll address it in a future issue, but check out the Jamaican in Asia, Jamaican Nomad in Asia YouTube channel if you want to see some of my interactions with ladies in this region. All right. So thanks for that question. All right, so no question is off limits, but not every question will be answered. And I do take all of the questions seriously because it is fun and interesting to interact with my viewers. Okay, another question that's really interesting is what's your favorite flavors of Lara bars? Okay, so the reason I think W. Sigona is asking this question is that throughout my books, throughout my Ageless Adept YouTube channel, I always mention the fact that my vices are uh, taro chips and Lara bars. So when I first came to the island, those did not exist here. Apparently, not many people were um, health nuts or vegetarians or vegans. So the stores here were simply not carrying some of the items that I've become accustomed to in my lifestyle. So I requested that the major stores here, carry some of the products, Ezekiel tortilla, the Lara bars, kettle chips, Terra chips, Cliff bars. So now Bob's Red Mill products. So now you can find some of those in the major supermarkets here, and some of that is thanks to me and other individuals. We formed a little group at one point in the past to request some of those items. The reason the stores don't carry those items, obviously, is because I would be the only person buying them, and after a while they would spoil, or they would have to cut the price, reduce it by half price in order to make some money. So uh, one of the things that I was able to do is form a group, a buyers group of folks who promised to purchase some of the items, which made it a little bit more profitable or economically feasible for the stores to carry them. And in the course of doing so, other people within the community found out about it. So some of those items have stuck. So now I'm not the only person buying Terra chips and kettle chips and Lara bars. But to answer your question, I think pecan pie is my favorite, and then blueberry. These are the Lara bars. Blueberry and pecan pie are my favorite. And cashew would be the three. Cashew, pecan bar, and blueberry. Hope that's helpful. All right. Okay. Great, great, great. One of the popular topics on the internet, depending on what rabbit hole you've fallen into, is the fact that there are men who are leaving Western societies, and I've made reference to this before, men who are leaving Western societies and like the US, for example, Canada, the UK, Australia, and moving to the Asia Pacific region, specifically to Thailand, to Vietnam, Cambodia, the Philippines, in search of female companionship. So if you do a search online for the Passport Bros, BROS, as in brothers, Passport Bros, you will find stories and websites and YouTube channels devoted to giving advice to men of the West who, for their own reasons, have gotten to a point of fatigue with the dating scene and the dating market in the West, and they've therefore um, uh, gotten their passports in order and have moved overseas in order to find their companionship, female companionship. So um, I'm not sure this channel will turn into one of the passport bros, but I guess I would fall into that category as well, in that uh, if you there is a different way of being that exists that many men who grow up in the West are simply unaware of. There are the men who have cut their teeth on dating in the West believe that male female interaction proceeds along a certain path. And I'm being purposely vague in certain regards, but I will get specific. So they've grown up thinking that women are a certain way, that men are a certain way, that the dating dynamics are a certain way, and they are unaware that entirely different definitions of masculinity, entirely different definitions of femininity, entirely different expectations when it comes to male gender roles and female gender roles exists on this side of the world. And many of them are pleasantly surprised when they go to Southeast Asian countries and experience that interaction. And many men who have come here to Saipan have commented, and we comment amongst ourselves, that we could never go back to dating in the West because things here are just a much friendlier, much easier. Men like women, women like men, and no one is chastised for expressing that interest. There are there's a world of difference between how women are and how men are on this side of the world. And for many men, it's a refreshing change that they are um, not willing to give up once they've experienced it here on this side of the world. So I will say that uh, again, it's you don't know what you don't know. There's there's unconscious incompetence. You're not aware of what you don't know until you actually come here. So, one of the best bits of advice I would give someone if they're coming here in search of romance, and when I say here, I mean this region, is not to make any quick moves within your first few months of coming here. Many men make the mistake of committing to and selling the ranch, if you will, based on the affections of a single individual who they meet within a few weeks of landing here on this side of the world. So my best advice would be, please don't do that. Realize that there's millions of fish in the sea, and that you should not be overwhelmed by the warmth, the tenderness, the femininity that you experience here, and believe that it represents paradise and what you've been looking for because you've never experienced it before. And again, I've seen guys do that, and they end up making mistakes, choosing the wrong people, and cutting off their options, so that they end up in a worse situation, because then the ones that they may invariably encounter within minutes of landing in Thailand or wherever in the Philippines are those people who are the most predatory, those women who are the most predatory. So they end up being claimed by women who have ulterior motives, and they end up being fleeced for their resources. So um, yes, sounds like the USA. Um, so that's my bit of advice: is there is a different world here, but at the same time, you may not see that different world if your expectations have not also been wiped clean. So what do I mean by that? I mean that if you believe that things are a certain way, that women are a certain way everywhere in the world, then you may not be able to see. You'll suffer from what's known as confirmation bias. You'll only see the evidence that confirms the bias that you already have, and you may not recognize the fact that people may not be as mercenary as you expect them to be. All right. So one of the things, again, that's one of the benefits of taking a wait and see approach, of being in observer mode, being able to uh, clear the slate of your negative expectations of relationships um, before you make any decision to commit otherwise. So that's my bit of advice to you as far as coming to this side of the world. Okay, question. Rhythms and Retrogrades asked, how are the school systems on the island? That one I will have to defer to someone else. I have no children, none that I know of. Ha ha ha. So, the public school system, I know that, let's see. I'm gonna refrain from answering that question as far as the school system goes. So let me do some research, and I will get some insights from people who have had experience both with mainland schools and with island schools. What I can tell you, I have visited schools in over the years and done presentations. I find the students here are much more attentive, less rowdy, uh, naive in certain ways, but easier to interact with than school children stateside. So there's cultural conservatism. People are a little bit better behaved, but as far as the quality of the education itself, that I really can't speak on. So again, I'll defer answering that, and maybe if you're on Saipan and actually watching this, and you have some experience, feel free to share it now, or feel free to share it in the comments. One thing I can tell you from personal experience is when I wrote the book, The Relocation Guide, I ended up running into the postmaster here on Saipan, and he recognized me, and he came over, and he thanked me for writing the book, The Saipan Living Relocation Guide. And it helped him make his decision. I think he had 4 or 6 kids. So he's the previous postmaster here at the Chalankano office, and he said he wanted his children to get an experience in school, interacting with folks from different cultures and different backgrounds. So he was glad that he made the move here. He took the position of being the postmaster. He sent his kids to school here on the island, and he was glad that the kids were able to um, have classes with Chinese, with Japanese, with Filipinos, with local folks. So that sort of worldly experience is something that he was glad for. So that's just one individual's experience that I'm aware of personally. But again, as far as the quality itself, in terms of how proficient the kids will be in reading and writing and arithmetic, and whether they'll be able to compete on different levels with kids from other countries or stateside, that I have no idea. But that's an interesting question. Um, I have run into, thank you, our children are homeschooled. That's probably the best thing that you can do for your kids, is homeschool them. I've run into several individuals over the just this last year alone. As a matter of fact, I've run into military folks who live on the base and are raising their families on the base and are homeschooling their children. And it's really interesting, really fascinating to interact with them. And one of the questions I had, though, for them was whether their children, they were living in Japan, I believe. So I wondered whether their children, even though they were homeschooled, were able to interact with kids in the public school system. Because, in my opinion, again, and you should listen to my opinion because I have no children, but in my opinion, I believe that there is some benefit to having your children interact with other children from other families in a public school system if they're homeschooled. And again, I have no experience in this, but it's just my feeling that that would help round them out in different ways. That I think is important. So homeschooling, I definitely support that, but I also think that it would be wise if something could be organized. I think one of the families told me that it was possible, and it did organize with public schools in the region to have days where their homeschool kids got together with kids in the public school system, which I think helps broaden their worldviews. But thanks for that question. Would it be easy? PDH asks, or PTH asks, would it be easy for me to open a bank account and have my Social Security transferred to it? I am absolutely sure that that would be no issue at all. Um, unless there's some restriction on where the Social Security Administration does direct deposit. I don't think there should be, but again, you don't have to open a bank account here locally. You could, as I do, simply maintain your your um, um, online banking, or Bank of America, or Capital One, or your Fidelity, or whatever credit union you have. You will still have access to those. remember, in that regard, Saipan is just like any other state. You move to Jersey, you move to Pennsylvania, you still have your bank account that you can have access to. So there's no real need for you to set up a bank account here that is separate and apart from the ones you already have. So I don't think, unless I'm misunderstanding your concern, that I don't think that'll be an issue for you at all. Okay, so interesting. I turned down a position at the post office because I was afraid I would make enough money to survive because the job was part-time. I was afraid. I'm going to assume you meant that you would not make enough money to survive because the job was part-time. I turned down a position at the post office. Um, okay, thanks for that. Uh, okay. All right. Very, very thankful you guys participated. If I missed any questions, we're going to be wrapping up soon. It's coming up to that time again. But I really do appreciate you guys participating. We're getting close to the growth. We're almost at 1,800 subscribers, which in the grand scheme of things, if you talk to any 15-year-old, they'll say I'm essentially non-existent. But the channel is growing, the views are continuing, so pretty soon we'll hit the next major milestone. I really appreciate all the support you guys have been giving. So with that, I will just say again, please feel free to leave any questions that you have in any of the comments. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can give a super chat at this time or under any of the videos on the channel. If you're interested in purchasing any of the books, check out saipanliving.com or go to waltgoodridge.com. And if you're interested specifically in the relocation guide, then email me at walt@discoversaipan. If you would prefer to use Zelle or PayPal rather than your credit card to make a purchase. And I'll thank you. The job would have been around 2,000 a month. Now, someone had asked recently, I'll just make this a final question. Someone had asked recently, I think their Social Security benefit was about $2,000 a month, and the question was whether they could survive on that. And we determined that based on the cost of living here on Saipan, based on the fact that you can get a rental, a one-bedroom apartment for $300, $400, $500, based on spending, as I do, maybe $400 a month on food, that it was absolutely doable, and even factoring in car insurance, that it was absolutely doable to live on $2,000 to $3,000 a month. Now, it's not for everybody, but if you can refrain from indulging in your vices to the appropriate degree, then it is possible, if that's the only source of income, that 2,000, 2,500 is doable here on Saipan. But again, if you're not into living as a minimalist, and if you want to have a little bit more luxury, then and you have the means to generate more money, then yes, absolutely. Then you can get air conditioning rather than use a fan as I do. So, but with that said, thank you guys for participating. I'll see you guys in the next live stream. And again, ask your questions, show your support, and thanks for watching. See you in the next live stream.